So it's 2026 and we're looking forward to an exciting year in the property market. 2025 was a very good year for property investors and people that own property in South Africa. And we believe that 2026 will probably be even better. What I'm going to do today is the sort of annual predictions for the property market for the year lying ahead. I'm glad to say that in 2024 and 2025, we were pretty spot on with the predictions. And let's hope that in 2026, we can continue this. As I've said before, we're not some genie in a lamp that has foresight or a crystal ball, but having sort of boots on the ground and doing the sort of volumes that we do, it certainly does give us insight into the way that the property market is trending. And the property market moves slowly. The wheels turn slowly, things change slowly. So if you've watched the 2025 wrap-up video that we did earlier or at the end of 2025, a lot of this discussions that we had there will flow into 2026, and I will try and give perspective into how these things will go into 2026. So what to expect in the 2026 property market? If you're watching this episode, I'm going to try and give you some insight into trends that I see continuing into 2026 and maybe giving you some insights into what I think the market will be doing. The big hot topic right now is interest rates. I think over the past 12 months in South Africa, we've seen prime interest rates reducing by a full 1%. The great news right now is that as we speak, there's a lot of projections that this will be reduced even further into 2026. So like in 2025, we called a continuation of interest rate relief or the start of it. Now I think what's very exciting is that we believe that in 2026, we will see a further continuation of interest rate relief. What this would mean is that it would open up a whole lot of buyer activity. First-time buyers would get better access to property, with affordable terms, and sort of on a smaller level, like what we had during the COVID years, a lot of tenants may opt to purchase. Okay, so with property ownership becoming more affordable with lower interest rates in the initial years, I do see that the buyer activity in the entry-level market will certainly pick up. I think it will even spill over into your mid-market, but I think the biggest turnaround is going to be in that entry-level market where people that are most cash-strapped will find these reliefs the most welcomed. The second prediction, I think, keeping in trend, I want to speak about the rental market. In a high-level overview, what's going to happen in that rental market. I think we will, for the first half of the year, still see some aggressive recoveries of rental escalation. And then in the second half of the year, I see that cooling off. As inflation starts dipping down towards the end of 2026 and property ownership becomes more affordable with interest rates, I do think landlords will start moving their sentiment into long-term retention rather than correction. But for the first half of 2026, I still see a lot of aggressive corrections coming through. And then in the later half of 2026, this cooling off. The third prediction is one that's maybe property specific. So in 2024, we called out that the investor would be returning in 2025, and it caught us a little bit off guard as to how long it took people to actually realize the opportunity in the market. At the start of 2025, interest rates were on a downward cycle, rentals were on an upward cycle, and I truly believe that people would jump on those opportunities early on. The reality is that the market was slow to react, maybe due to some cautious optimism, maybe due to having had bad experiences in the past and maybe just wanting the market to recover a little bit more before jumping in. But in the second half of 2025, we certainly saw the investor returning. Now, today, I want to make a prediction to say that will continue, but I want to make a specific prediction, is that this would be heavily focused in the sectional title market. Why do I say the sectional title market? For two reasons. Number one, with the amounts of purchasing power that will be unlocked with the reduced interest rates, and the forcing of hand of a lot of tenants to actually look at property ownership as an alternative to renting. The first place that they will start to look at is the sectional title market. Why? Because this is the most affordable segment in the property market, and it's also the most achievable. So I do see this investor focus probably being, and probably not only investor focus, I do see a lot of activity coming about in 2026 in that sectional title market. The sectional title market, funnily enough, in many areas in South Africa, pricing has been under pressure. Yeah, it sort of largely aligns with the sub 2 million rand market being under pressure, and during the 2024 periods. And now, with the recovery of that purchasing power of your first time buyer, but also the return of the investor, I do think the sectional title market is probably one that's going to start moving quicker than in the past. It's due for a recovery. The sectional title market, barring one or two really sort of nodes that have broken the rules, I think generally our sectional title market has trailed behind the rest of the property market. So watch out for that one, and look for the early sprouts. I haven't quite seen it just yet, but I've just got this feeling that towards the mid to second half of 2026, we're probably going to see a lot more activity in that sectional title market than what we used to. The fourth prediction for 2026 is a serious stock shortage, specifically in the Western Cape. So in the Western Cape, over the second half of 2025, we saw stock in certain price segments really drying up, or not necessarily drying up, but mismatching the demand. So demand far outweighed supply in the second half of 2025. And I think the segment where this was most true was in the price brackets 3 to 4.5 million rand. Now, this is something that I think is going to become a very hard reality in 2026. It's only as recently as the last month that this has been a serious problem in the Western Cape. This is largely due to the fact that it's becoming increasingly difficult to take a new product to market in this price range. The shrinkflation is real. Developers are facing high costs of land, as well as coming off the tail end of high inflationary costs in the construction environment. So I think looking into 2026, it's going to be even harder for developers to put product in that price bracket into the market. And what this will do is it will force all of your buyers in that price segment to look at the second-hand market. And the second-hand market simply does not have enough stock for that great demand. Now, internally as a business and sort of looking at this, speaking to industry peers, we can put this down to a number of different aspects, but I think stock shortages in 2026 probably going to be a real problem. Now, while stock may be in short supply in the Western Cape, I think you're probably going to find the inverse in a lot of the other metros. I think growing prices in some of the recovering metros will make it attractive for sellers to maybe dispose of their properties and move to something else. If you've been strapped in or knuckled down into a property that hasn't had particularly strong capital growth, and you experience one or two cycles of good capital growth and heading in the right way, it brings about not only confidence in the market, but it also will give you the opportunity to exit, to maybe upgrade, move along, or reinvest your money somewhere else. So non-Western Cape metros, I actually see the inverse happening. I actually see a lot of stock coming to market, and I expect higher trading volumes throughout 2026. So the fifth prediction will be higher trading volumes and more stock in the non-Western Cape metros. So looking at Johannesburg, Tshwane, some of the metros in KZN, even down to the Eastern Cape and Free State, we do see a lot of these metro areas recovering, because they've come off such a low base over the last 5 years. The capital appreciation that they will experience over the next 12 months might actually entice these people to exit these properties, whether that be to upgrade or to move on to something else, or maybe just stimulate some desire that they've had for change. The moment things start looking upwards, sentiment also improves, and particularly in the property space. So I do see more supply of stock coming to market. How will that affect pricing? I think if the demand grows along with that, if sentiment, if demand sort of can meet the supply of new stock to market, I think it would create a very strong trading environment. However, if the demand is short-lived and a bit of a flash in the pan, this could create an oversupply scenario and put pricing under pressure, just sort of knocking it right back down to where they've started. I don't see this happening. I probably see that demand and supply will gradually increase, creating strong trading environment. And I'm pretty positive for the non-metros or the metros outside of the Western Cape for 2026. So let's see. This year feels like the first year that we are maybe making some bolder predictions that do not come from a comfort zone, and we may be putting ourselves out there. So let's see how much of this comes true, and let's see. Especially I think because a lot of this is centered outside of the Western Cape. This is always interesting for me because these markets are completely different to the Western Cape, but they are so interlinked. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Let me know in the comments if you agree with what we think. It was interesting when we went back to the 2025 prediction videos. A lot of people came back commenting saying how accurate these were. It will be interesting to see whether we have that same success with this video at the end of 2026. So thanks. If you've enjoyed this and you want to stay up to date with the latest content from the Property Corner, hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell, and stay up to date with the latest episodes from the Property Corner.